Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're doing a deep dive into the mental models of a guy who is quite literally always in the headlines, Elon Musk. Now, when most of us think about extreme success, we immediately picture this life of luxury, total ease, and glamorous freedom. But to truly understand the actual mechanics behind building these civilization-altering companies, we have to right off the bat subvert that whole billionaire myth. Because according to Musk's own warnings, the reality of achieving at this insane level is something vastly different than what you might imagine.
Just listen to this quote. It's not as much fun being me as you'd think. I mean, we're looking at a person with a net worth of roughly $230 billion. That is a staggering amount of wealth that makes him, by some metrics, the richest person on Earth. He's wealthier than literal kings of past centuries. But you have to contrast that immense number with the visceral, painful reality of his daily life. He's openly stated that he operates right on the edge of sanity. And why is that? Well, because at the massive scale his companies operate, every single high-quality minute of his thinking equates to $1 million impact. Talk about a crushing psychological weight, right? It's an environment of enormous stress, really thorny problems, and just constant, unrelenting pressure.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer, breaking his journey down into 5 actionable mental models. We're going to cover 1. The price of success. 2. Rethinking risk and failure. 3. Escaping zero-sum thinking. 4. A guide to being useful, and 5, the truth about happiness.
Starting off with part 1, the price of success and the reality of 100-hour weeks.
80 to 100. Yep, that is the sheer number of hours Musk insists you must work every single week if you want to start a company. It's a brutal equation for sure. But putting in those incredibly grueling hours is absolutely necessary, just to improve your baseline odds of success. In fact, he goes as far as to say that if you need encouragement to start a company, you probably shouldn't do it. You need an incredibly high pain threshold to survive.
To put that into perspective, look at the period between 2017 and 2019. Tesla was going through what Musk called 3 years of hell. They had messed up almost every single aspect of the Model 3 production line, from the body line to the paint shop to final assembly, the whole shebang. Tesla was literally the most shorted stock in history, facing relentless attacks and teetering right on the ragged edge of bankruptcy. And how did he respond? Well, he didn't retreat to some comfortable ivory tower. He lived in the Fremont and Nevada factories for 3 years straight. He abandoned the relatively comfy couch in the conference room and deliberately slept right on the floor under his desk, completely out in the open. He woke up smelling like metal dust. Why do that? So that during shift changes, his entire team could see him. They needed to know for a fact that he wasn't off drinking Mai Tais on a tropical island. He was proving he was taking on way more pain than they were.
Let's move on to part 2, rethinking risk and failure. Or, as we can call it, the scientific method of betting it all.
Less than 10%. That's the tiny chance of success Musk gave himself when he started a car company and a rocket company simultaneously. He fully expected to fail. He was entirely prepared to go bankrupt. He even noted that historical figures like John Law, who was the richest man on Earth 300 years ago, eventually lost it all too. Musk basically says, if I go bankrupt, fine, I don't care. The fear of losing absolutely everything just doesn't dictate his actions.
See, he views risk through this incredibly clinical, scientific lens. He asks, what is the outcome's importance and what are you risking to achieve it? If an outcome, like, say, sustainable energy, is absolutely critical for humanity's future, you just have to pursue it, even if failure is almost guaranteed. Because doing nothing, well, that guarantees a bad future. Therefore, taking no action is literally the ultimate risk.
But that brings up a really critical question for all of us to consider. How do you avoid the trap of wishful thinking? How do you actually know the difference between bravely sticking to your ideals and just pursuing a totally unrealistic dream that has zero actual merit? Musk admits this is one of the biggest mistakes people make, wanting something to be true so incredibly badly that you just completely ignore the real truth.
His solution for this? Rigorous self-analysis. You have to start with the baseline assumption that you are always, to some degree, wrong. It's kind of a humbling thought, right? Your goal isn't to prove you're right all the time, it's simply to be a little bit less wrong over time. Accepting your inherent fallibility is the first and honestly the most vital step to making better, more objective decisions and finally escaping that trap of wishful thinking.
Let's see how this builds as we pivot to part 3, escaping zero-sum thinking and growing the economic pie. Musk points out something super interesting here. He says that when genuinely smart people do morally questionable things, it's usually because they secretly have a zero-sum mindset. They really believe the economic pie is totally fixed. So, to their minds, getting a bigger slice means they have to take yours. But that is fundamentally false. The economic pie has grown dramatically over time. The real goal is to grow the pie, adding brand new value that expands the entire economy for everyone, rather than just extracting wealth from other people.
And this mindset completely redefines his view on charity and business. He looks at the literal root definition of philanthropy, which translates directly to the love of humanity. Under this specific definition, he actually considers his massive corporations to be philanthropic endeavors. Think about it. Tesla accelerates sustainable energy. SpaceX aims to make humanity multiplanetary. Neuralink works to solve devastating brain injuries. And the Boring Company tries to solve soul-crushing traffic, which impacts our daily health. He views building really useful companies to solve existential threats as the ultimate act of loving humanity. Bringing this narrative directly back to you, let's jump into Part 4, a guide to being useful and overlapping talent and interest.
He states it pretty bluntly. It is really, really hard to be useful. But living a useful life is a good life. Your goal should simply be to have a positive net contribution to society. Basically, are you contributing more than you're consuming? He strongly advises against seeking leadership just to be the boss. Instead, become a generalist. Read broadly across tons of different subjects. Talk to people from totally different walks of life. The ultimate goal here? Finding that absolute sweet spot where your natural talents perfectly overlap with what you actually enjoy doing.
So, how exactly does he test for that usefulness in other people? Well, when he interviews someone, he uses a very specific sequence. First, he asks for their life story and the decisions they've made. Then, he asks them to describe the absolute hardest problems they've ever faced. And finally, he asks them to explain exactly how they solve them. And this brilliantly illustrates his whole philosophy. Because true problem solvers know the mud. They know the granular tiny details. Fakers, or people who merely took credit for someone else's work, they can maybe go one level deep, but then they just get completely stuck. Which brings us to our final stop, Part 5, the truth about happiness and the limits of loving your work.
Now, for a man who literally champions 100-hour work weeks and sleeping on factory floors, this is a shockingly profound admission. Musk admits that to be fully happy, you have to be happy in both work and in love. He says that, in his own experience, a deep, passionate love for your work or your projects can, at best, make you only halfway happy. He even describes himself as being only medium happy. It is a stark, honest reminder that even the most extreme, unimaginable professional success simply cannot compensate for the fundamental human need for connection.
And that brings us to his final core lesson, and honestly, what sounds like his greatest ongoing challenge. When you reach the absolute highest levels of success, reality naturally becomes distorted. He states that one of the hardest things in life, period, is maintaining an honest, corrective feedback loop over time. Because the more successful you become, the more the people around you just want to tell you exactly what you want to hear. Actively finding the truth becomes this massive, everyday obstacle.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative question for you to take away from our explainer today. Are you maintaining an honest, corrective feedback loop in your own life? Are you actively surrounding yourself with people who will look you in the eye and tell you when you're wrong? Or are you just comfortably hearing exactly what you want to hear? It is the ultimate test of self-awareness. Thank you so much for joining me to deconstruct these mental models today. Keep